Hey there, Tim Schnurr, Inquisitive IT. Happy you joined us today. Today we're going to talk about cybersecurity awareness for individuals, or people not competing with their work devices anymore. So think about all of your digital life, all of your transactions, social media, banking, investing, doing these things on devices out of the box, devices you can buy Best Buy, Apple, and not on things that are probably managed. Maybe if you're a retiree now, you used to use a corporate device, and now you're counting on these things. So my background, Tim Schnurr, like I said, is I worked in the Big Four for cybersecurity for a couple of years, and a lot of experience dealing with risk. And not only that, risk with investment managers. What are the things they're looking at? What are the things they're trying to protect against, to protect their business interests, but also the clients' privacy data and their investments. So I'm going to throw some slides up here. We'll jump right into it. Probably be about 45 minutes. If you have any comments, please throw them in there. Matt Lee, howdy. Thanks for jumping on. This is a little different. Typically, most of my podcasts are focused on, MSPs, which are managed security providers, but this is really focused on individual security. And like I said, retirees, individuals that aren't covered by and protected by people like MSPs, which are, call them outsourced IT providers. Typically, think about a big corporation with a cybersecurity team and an IT team, right? So like I said, individuals that are out in the world doing things, investing, banking, paying their bills, paying their taxes. We'll talk about, a lot of the common attacks, the 5 most common attacks, certainly in my eyes, and how they're caused. What are some of the steps? What are some of the things you can do to protect yourself? So quick agenda, tell some quick horror stories of people being hacked or hurt online. And while we're going through those, we'll probably talk a little bit about some of the factors that attributed to these attacks. And then we'll talk about, step 2, we'll jump in really, the goal of individual security. We're not really trying to protect data here. We're really trying to protect access and authentication. So with that lens on, we're not talking about the entire cybersecurity universe. We're really talking about specifically data access, making sure your accounts are, you're not defrauded, ACH theft, wire theft. So Matt, another great comment here. You work hard for your money and people work hard to steal it. So there's quite an industry here, and these attacks are changing day by day. The vectors, the playbooks, the resources they have in the dark web, in the black market. So we're gonna jump through and just talk about specifically how these attacks happen and what are some of the things you can do to protect yourself. So the first one, and I know this story well, bride's family hires several vendors for, we'll call her Monica. The names here, I switched up some of the names. Monica's wedding. Vendor's email gets hacked. We call this business email compromise. The person who attacked sends invoices and demands payments before services are rendered at the wedding, right? As the wedding approaches, this is a very expensive wedding. They're requesting payment to basically pre-fund their services for the wedding. Invoices look legit. They're paid, but they don't flow to the right person. They don't flow to the vendor. They flow to an offshore entity, a contra account at a U.S. bank. The money is swiftly distributed overseas, and the money's gone. So it looks legit, but the invoices, so because they were able to steal their email, they know what these invoices looked like. They're basically just changing the the routing and the account numbers, right? So the result, unfortunately, was $600,000 in losses. Vendor at fault cannot make up the difference for that, goes under. Bride's family has to absorb the losses. Either it was already an extravagant wedding, made it even more expensive, or maybe it was a little smaller after all. So the attack routes there, right? Like I said, email, some social engineering, some manipulation, some trickery, right? That the family didn't realize that these invoices were illegitimate. They looked legitimate. None of the the interesting thing here is none of the family's accounts or accesses were hacked or broken into. So we'll talk about some best practices here on paying any kind of invoices, ACH or wire, and certainly for the first time, you should have some very specific routines and habits you follow. You should be overly cautious. I am petrified of paying vendors and sending big ACH payments because I know that once the money goes, it's gone. So next one here. So Kathy's phone all of a sudden stops working while running errands. This isn't unusual. She's in Florida. Florida has bad cell towers. It's flat. You don't get access in a lot of areas. But she gets suspicious when the phone is still not working at home. Thinking it's a billing or service issue, Kathy calls the phone service provider. These are probably some big companies. Kathy is informed of a phone swap, SIM swap. So what does this mean? So someone impersonated the admin, which is Kathy, or someone in her family, on the account and changed the service to their phone. So they call it a SIM swap because the SIM basically is that little chip that goes in usually on the right side. It's hidden on an iPhone. You see it, in TV shows like Homeland, they're smashing these little chips up, right? That's really what drives the identification or marking of the phone. So anyway, the Kathy, someone basically called the service provider pretending to be her, had all of the answers. And these answers were probably stolen either through dark web data, which would be previous breaches or data leakages, or there's some kind of phishing attempt where a link was sent that looks real, ups.com, amazon.com, your packages are showing up late. And they use this collective information to figure out, what's the password, dog's name, password 123, birth dates, right? Mother's maiden name, mother's grandmother's maiden name, and have enough information to switch the phone. You call the service provider, I'm pretending to be a adversary right now. I lost my phone in a cab last night. Here's the password, here's this and this, and all of a sudden you're in business. You basically changed the phone. So while this is happening, the attackers changed, they escalated this attack as well. They were able to send 6-digit text MFA codes right from a bank account. Some of the biggest banks in the US right now are still using fairly weak forms of multi-factor authentication. Some of the people on the phone are cybersecurity people. Some are in financial services. So multi-factor authentication is a second way to authenticate to an account. So by gaining access to this, the attackers were able to send payments. So this quickly escalated from not only switching the phone over, but sending payments. And once those payments are gone, they're gone. So this attack, right? This unfortunate situation here, the attack sources or routes, or dark web data, or a phishing attempt. So they were able to get all this access. Maybe the person's reusing passwords, weak MFA, right? The bank is using a text MFA that is tied to the phone. So in the US, and I think most places around the world, your identity is tied to your phone number. And if the phone number moves to a different device, you're in trouble. So We'll talk about some of the other forms of multi-factor authentication, MFA, that are safer to use than text-based 6-digit, some of the other forms as well. So here's the story. This is pretty common even before, a lot of these cyber attacks have ramped up over the past couple of years. One day, Laura received a phone call from her credit card company saying someone had tried to update a credit card using her name and address. The impersonator created more than 50 accounts in Laura's name. I have another friend that has personally had this happen to them as well. And using that credit, was able to open utilities, heat, cable, electricity, basically living as like a duplicate of yourself in some other part of the country. So, same kind of backstory here, dark web data, getting enough information on yourself that they were able to leverage that information and open up bank accounts. Unfortunately, there's a good and a bad here. The person wasn't out of the country, so you're able to basically pursue them. But at the same time, it's ridiculously easy probably to open up heat, cable, electricity, and pull off some of this identity theft. So like I said, the attack route here is the dark web data, that information. So you got to be really careful. We'll talk about that here and some of the best practices on how you monitor kind of the data that's out there on yourself. Some of this is credit monitoring, which probably doesn't fall under this cybersecurity umbrella, but there's some overlap there in terms of dark web data and credit monitoring. I wasn't going to add this one, but recently United Healthcare had a big data breach. It was caused by weak MFA or a missing MFA. They actually didn't have MFA enabled on one of the admin accounts. Combine this, with potentially dark web data, weak passwords. I don't know the full extent of it, and I think it's coming out in front of Congress, but it just shows you that the importance of having strong MFA. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. Here's one I got just yesterday. This is a screenshot from my phone. This would be a phishing link, right? So it's meant to look real, but I guarantee it's fake. So Coinbase is a cryptocurrency exchange, Bitcoin, Ethereum, some other cryptocurrency, and they have some of the best cybersecurity. They do this because they are not protected like a normal bank by the FDIC. They're not insured for their deposits, and people that own Bitcoin and Ethereum, you can tell I probably own a little bit of that, but they have some very sophisticated cybersecurity. They're the tip of the spear because the losses are very litigious. People that have basically been broken into and stolen their Coinbase accounts. There could be millions at stake. So it's very important that they have very high security. So in this case, please confirm your details to continue trading. This is a clear phishing attempt to, maybe they know I have a Coinbase account, maybe they don't, but they're looking for me to enter into a fake web page and start entering in password, MFA, and gain access to that account and be off and running with this cryptocurrency to be pushed off to somewhere else in the world. So just an example, phishing links in text. I mean, if you're not getting one a day, I'd be surprised. So, but the stakes are incredibly high for something like Coinbase. So those are just a couple stories for individual retirees and people, anyone outside of work, right? The goal of using digital conveniences without a loss, right? You want the upside, the positive and the benefits of usually digital conveniences, online banking, bill pay, all the great things, Amazon shopping. But at the same time, you don't want to suffer a loss through a scam, through an attack. So we're going to talk, like I said, we'll continue to tie these attacks to some of the best practices that you can do to avoid these things. So cybersecurity is interesting, right? So you can't, there's no such thing as 100% secure. I use this analogy quite often. Most attacks are a combination of assets or really vulnerabilities or gaps in your security. So this is basically a picture of some antelopes crossing the savannah in Africa, right? There's prey of hyenas and tigers and lions, not tigers. So the idea is to be the middle of the pack here. You can pay a lot of money, you can lead, you'll always get away, but that would be too expensive, right? Most individuals can't afford $1,000 a month in managed security and all the tools and things you can do to make your life safer. So you want to be just safe enough. What's just enough security? So like I said, you want to be in the middle of the pack here. So I'm going to recommend a bunch of best practices here. Some of them are, more important and take a lot of the risk off the table, but you'll never be perfectly secure. So, so cybersecurity is a combination of people, processes, and technology. So I'm calling this a multi-layer approach. And when I say people, process, and technology, that's the tech, procedures, and people and processes is a combination of habit and the way you approach things like paying bills or sending wires or ACH payments. That would be procedures and policies and habit and awareness and best practices. Additionally, you can hire some third-party, support like a managed service provider. We do some things like that to enhance your security, to monitor your security. But support is also part of that multi-layer approach. So procedure and policy, this is, I grew up, went to college, late 90s, 2000s. Email really started to become a thing. Over time, you should probably, you've accumulated a bunch of accounts, put these in a personal email address, and then try to put your try to separate wealth and personal or financial and personal by creating a email account specifically for banking and for investing. This will, by having this divide or silo, you'll be able to avoid a lot of the common attacks. Business email compromise, which I gave in one of those stories, is one of the easiest ways to have a password breach. Also, so it just creates this silo. So when you get an email in the wrong place, it's not supposed to be there and it's probably fake. The other thing in terms of procedures and policies, and we'll talk about password managers in a little bit, but complex and unique passwords are really important. You should no longer be using fluffy 123 password 1234 across your accounts. They get breached once, they get breached everywhere. And you no longer, your accounts are no longer safe. So password managers, which are a little bit of a hot button, they're a hot button item, because if someone can gain your access to your password manager, they can access all of your accounts. But the good thing is the passwords can be unique, they can be long, very difficult to crack, and it eliminates this problem if there's a data breach, if you get phished and your password's out there. You're going to have a bunch of unique passwords. So you're basically limited to each account and the risk there. you guys have any comments or questions, as Matt Lee has done so nicely here, please put them in the LinkedIn comments, and happy to ask them and stop or go back. So along these same lines, in terms of separating your email and financial life, you should also, you should be putting financial services and tying the access to those. You might not be able to do this with a phone, obviously, because most people only have one phone, but your emails can be separated for your financial services, your investing account. If you have a habit of having your money in multiple savings accounts, you can tie one savings or checking account, have smaller amounts, and push money down to that savings account. So you're limiting your access, and you're less secure your personal everyday life. This is important because you're going to limit your losses as well. So you are going to have less access to those investment accounts, but at the same time, they're going to be safer. And we'll talk a little bit about this, but this idea of least trust. Least trust is a term that you may have heard. Zero trust, right? So you're trying to limit the access to accounts. This limits the ability of the people that can be breached. If you limit the amount of people that can be breached, you can limit the risk of a breach risk. So having these separate accounts, like I said, pushing and not pulling the money from the large, multi-million-dollar retirement account, and then have the everyday savings account tied to that personal email, also can create this divide. So let's talk about some of the technologies that can help accomplish these goals. So I'll skip the part here on Chromebooks. I'm a big fan of Chromebooks and the Google ecosystem. I also work with clients that have MacBooks and PC laptops, PC workstations, right, to secure those. So we'll talk monitoring and alerts helps you understand if you're being attacked. I talked a little bit about, from the preventive side, monitoring is important as well. Credit monitoring, as well as dark web monitoring. I'll give you a screenshot of that in just a sec here, of a dark web search on myself. But you need to, in addition to this kind of preventive monitoring, there's also the detection of attacks as they come in, which is frequently called EDR, MDR, XDR. These three-letter acronyms really talk about endpoint detection and response. EDR, we'll start with the simplest one. And those are monitoring, is an attack happening? Can we stop it? Can we investigate where it came from? The most important thing, and this is probably one of the biggest key takeaways here, is this idea of phishing resistant authentication. So before, we talked about Kathy, who had her phone taken and there was a SIM swap, and they were able to text a 6-digit code to themselves in a far off land and steal the money. There's this idea of using YubiKeys and passkeys, which are backed by encryption. It's called FIDO2 encryption, private keys and public keys. This ability to change the dynamic of your phone number being your identity. And this has to do with using a YubiKey or a passkey is able to bind your identity to the device. So if you've gotten breached, they've taken your password, they're no longer no longer able to basically authenticate in a far off land. And this is really important because a lot of attacks are coming from offshore, from China, Russia, North Korea. Like I said, the islands. This will be able to stop that. So we'll go through some of those attacks and how phishing resistant authentication, phishing resistant MFA, is able to basically disrupt these attacks. And I think this is a really important thing. Individuals should be using passkeys and YubiKeys. And I say "and" because you usually need two forms of MFA, and it's nice to make sure it's nice that they're both very secure. So shout out to Fido. Continuing on, these are some other best practices. They're probably in prioritization, vulnerability scans and patching. So vulnerabilities are software bugs. All code, all software that's running on your machine, trillions of lines of code is vulnerable. I guess vulnerable is not the best word here, but it's a matter of time before there's some kind of backdoor or bug in them. So by scanning your machine, your laptop, not necessarily your phone, but your laptop and your computers that you're using for these vulnerabilities is important. We'll talk about that in a bit. Why vulnerabilities, how they get exploited, in the kill chain or in the routes of an attacker. EDR, we just talked about that. Endpoint detection and response is a really fire alarm system to know that there's been an attacker inside or potentially an attacker. It's important to realize when this is happening so you can act quickly, have a good incident response plan to stop the attacker and limit the damage. This is a great question here. So do FIDO keys pose an inconvenience to the user? They actually make the process less frictionless. So I have numerous Google accounts, and by logging in with a passkey, you're actually not even prompted for a password. It's passwordless. So put your name in, Tim Schnur at Google, Tim at whatever. It'll ask for the passkey. You show your face. You can use your finger actually on a MacBook. It happens incredibly quickly. So life is better. It's infrequent in cybersecurity that things become less frictionless. So, passkeys are just a no-brainer given the advantages that they have. So it's certainly not an inconvenience. It's less friction. So number 6, managed browser. Managed browser, if anyone's ever worked in a bank before, you go into a bank on a Monday and all of a sudden you can't check fantasy football. Or, some other sites you want to access. So the bank has decided they want to limit the things that you can access on the internet, and a managed browser has the capability of doing that, but also limiting malware and sites that would be potentially malicious or execute some kind of software against you. So managed browser is something we deploy with some of our high net worth clients. It's able to take off a lot of the potential ransomware, but also unsafe sites, and slow down the execution of those deliverables and stop some bad things from happening. So managed browser is important. Also, if it's a fake website, if it's Google with a 6 and not a Google with an E at the end, it won't access it. So managed browser, like I said, it's something that can disrupt the kill chain from an attacker trying to, use, deliver a script to your computer. This is something you'll see more and more of in the IT outsourcing world, MSP world. Managed browser, I've made some big posts talking about how it's going to be really important this year. Dedicated backups. I think I mentioned earlier, we're really focused on authentication and access, but your data is always important. Data security is a massive industry. Companies need to protect consumers' data. So data is really important, but for now, we'll just talk about dedicated backups. Google Storage, iCloud are some of the most common ones. Configuration management, number 8, is very similar to number 4. So configs on your computer, you take the computer out of the box. They say Microsoft computers are only 20% configured to be cyber safe or secure. Usually in a corporate atmosphere, your InfoSec team, information security team, your IT team would configure your machine to be safer. What do they mean by that, right? So maybe you turn off the USB drives, maybe you configure the way the browser accepts all traffic, as number 6, where I was just talking about. But configuration management is just as important as vulnerability scans, because these are gaps or vulnerabilities for attackers to leverage. So this can be managed by an outsourced IT provider like an MSP, and they've got some fantastic tools that can do this. Windows machines, Mac machines, Google, to configure things like this. So the other thing is regular updates and patching. This goes along. I worked at a vendor that was doing vulnerability scans for about a year and a half. The biggest improvement in those vulnerability scans week over week was simply just updating the machine. So being on the newest version of Windows, Google, Chrome, whatever it may be, always trying to update your software. So if you've got an old laptop, an old Mac that no longer supports the newest OS, that laptop's going to be inherently inherently unsafe compared to top of the line, current, newest, regularly updated machine, because those machines are going to have some of the newest security updates. They're going to try to fix some of the broken code and bugs that were in those old ones. So regular patching, regular updating, having new and modern technology is really important there. Number 10, attackers are continuing to innovate and find new ways to improvise and attack. So working, being wary, being understanding of the new solutions as they're released. These are going to provide a higher risk on return on your investment, on your effort that you're giving to cybersecurity. A great example would be this passkeys, which is a very, very new thing that's being, it was really invented to stop these MFA attacks, or the MFA being a source of attacks, but it's a genius idea that's very effective against attackers. So password managers, I wanted to give this a separate call out. Talked about this a little bit before. Apple Keychain, Google has a password manager, Microsoft has a password manager. There's some independent ones as well. By using a password manager, you have a complex, long, total gibberish password that even if one site gets improvised, you don't improvise. You're not going to compromise them all. So complex passwords as well, they simply create the password for you. So if you want to use a 15,000 line complex password, which I think may be something we see in the future here, you don't really care because it's creating the password for you. Maybe there'll be quantum computing safe, for all I know, but they're unique, they're complex. You don't have to remember them, and you can possibly use a passkey, like a Google passkey, to open up that password manager, which has to be tied to your device, right? Bound to your device. It has the private key on the device. So it's a 1-2 punch here with the password manager and the passkey. I did a quick video about a month ago, but passkeys, I'm trying not to jinx it here as being a magic bullet, but you can see some of the attacks we talked about here, and how passkeys in the red is able to disrupt a bunch of these attacks, right? Not having MFA is bad, but phishing resistant MFA is also bad. Phishing, weak MFA, SIM swap vulnerabilities. The passkeys here are really able to stop a lot of that. Not necessarily on the vulnerabilities, but they can still disrupt a phishing attack. So Down in the lower left are the solutions, patching, passkeys. We just mentioned patching. You can have 100 different other tools that are able to help you stop some of these attacks as well. So phishing, there's a lot of phishing awareness simulations out there. There really are no shortcuts to logging in. So if someone says you get a UPS delivery text, or you get an email saying, hey, Coinbase, I need you to re-authenticate your account, never click on these on the links. Don't pass go, I like to say. Always start on go. Always navigate to the website independently. If you navigate independently, you've got a legitimate link, and you're not being phished with a perfectly good looking you think to be legitimate website. So don't pass go. Always start on the web page and navigate directly to the web page. Bank of America, right into the Google search bar, right? So messages urgently asking for money are a red flag. Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist is full of fraud. Zelle fraud, or asking for ACH details. Make a deposit now before you come pick up the boat. Make a deposit now before you come pick up the car. Bad news. Got to be very wary of these things. First story I talked about was invoice manipulation, paying the scammer, not the vendor, not the landscaper or whoever whatever service you're getting it from. So when it comes to ACH and wires, and it's a first-time payment, be really creative. Be incredibly wary. Figure out a way to call them, confirm the ACH and account numbers online, on the phone. Call someone up again. Still be wary. Call the second person up, right? Is this the right ACH and wire? Because once you get that set up for the first time in bill pay, it's secure. So like I said, just be incredibly wary, be very creative, and to figure out a way to make sure that that's a legitimate account. Last week, I invested in a new call it fund in New York City. I rode my bike down to the office to make sure that there was actually an office there. So the Bernie Madoff test, I'll call it, that there was actually a real legitimate office there, and the guy who said he worked there. So be creative, be wary, because these scams are quite common, and the more you can confirm, the better you'll feel that there's not some kind of fraud happening. Like I said, always start with go here, and I've got the UB key, the pass key to log in, right? So we just talked about that. Always navigate to safe communications. Don't click on text or email. Start on the website login with the UB key, preferably. Not all websites and services support UB key. Unfortunately, there's a password, a pass key, or a UB key. UB key is another FIDO2 form of a pass key. There's individually one for each site, so you've got to create one for each site. But it's also, at the same time, the upside's still there. The really important ones are like Apple Keychain, Google Password, the ones that are controlling your password managers. Like I said, call and verify the phone number. Be creative. Turn on credit card and bank notification of all payments and activity. A lot of times you can do this for more than a certain amount, like $200, but having this understanding of exactly when payments are hitting, it's really not that annoying. You're really not paying for that many things. So it's good to have an understanding of when payments are hitting. Enable Apple Pay for small payments. Avoid card readers. Europe has had payment at the table for years, but your credit card being walked away by someone in a restaurant, there's risk there. So the more you can pay with Apple Pay or pay with the terminals, the better. multi-party approval is something new. If anyone's on the webinar here is familiar with multi-sig signature, and like in crypto, it's like the nuclear football. There has to be 2 individuals to approve things. So this is coming to Google Workspace. It's actually being rolled out, I think, this month. So you want to reset your YubiKey or passkey, or you want to re-authenticate. Maybe you have someone else, your partner, your spouse, be that other person that has to also approve a new login or a new password reset for one of your accounts. This helps make it extra safe. Same thing with ACH payments and wires, right? Like have double authentication. Number 6, talked about password managers. Do not store creds for business Google. This would be like a managed Chrome account. So sometimes you actually want to put the opposite. There's very few things I like to write down, but that might be one of them. So Wi-Fi best practices at home, on the road, always use a hotspot. Public Wi-Fi is not safe. There's people that impersonate Starbucks Wi-Fi, and they're able to basically take over your machine or your phone. So by using a mobile hotspot, you avoid all that mess. Virtual private network, if you have to use public Wi-Fi, you're in a foreign country, or it's just expensive and you want to be on virtual private network, VPN is what that stands for, is also a good option. It's also good to use it at home. So even though your home network you think is safe, VPN provides an extra layer of protection. I'm using it currently. Cloud4 Warp is a free quasi VPN, but it has some of the same characteristics. So just Google Cloud4 Warp, install it, and you're off and running. Setting up a guest network on home router, changing default router settings. Most routers out of the box are admin password 123 or something like that. That leaves your guest home network vulnerable to being logged into and attacked or changed. So setting up a guest network also separates that the networks, segments the networks between your less safe devices. Call them your Ring doorbells, your cameras, your vacuums from China or wherever they're from. Put those on the guest network, and you can segment the network between what you're computing on and doing your work on, and what you're actually, some of these less secure devices can use the guest network. Other best practices, recently did this. Fortunately, someone in my family passed away, and we didn't have a legacy plan on Google or Apple. You can Google these quickly, and by declaring someone in your family as a legacy contact, it'll make it a lot easier for the account handover. Think of it as like your digital will. Dark web scan we talked about. I'll show you a snapshot of mine recently. Google One is a free service depending on what level of Google you're on, but there's several vendors and providers out there that do dark web scams. Understanding, are you seeing a lot of breaches or data leakages of your data out there is important. Talked about using passkeys, but also individually using them on social media. LinkedIn accounts get attacked all the time. WhatsApp, Amazon.com. My wife's been compromised, I think, 4 times. So we're both on passkeys, and they can put a passkey for myself and for my wife. So it's not, passkeys are flexible like that as well. So both our devices are registered to Amazon.com, preventing future attacks. AI applications like ChatGPT and Gemini. There's another comment on here. So passkeys sync to cloud accounts and devices are not properly secured are also a new attack vector to think about. That's right. So you've got to make sure that these are configured correctly and are not tied to like keychain or something like that. We can talk about the detail, and if you're interested in this, I can show you the how you actually install one and configure it. So AI applications like ChatGPT and Gemini own your data forever. Understand the terms and conditions and don't input sensitive data into them, or else some stranger may pull up information. We don't really know how these large language models work, but it's important that you realize the terms and conditions and where your data is going by using some of these new AI features. I'm a little wary because they're popping up actually in Microsoft Copilot, Google Workspace. They haven't, for sensitive data like banking and things like that. Like I said, I'm still a little wary on that. Here's my dark web results. Recently, my health supplements provider was attacked. Phone number, name, address, email. Apparently I had my details in MGM. I don't think I've ever stayed there. Maybe in Detroit. Is that an MGM? But the MGM leakage, my name must have popped up as there as well. Evite, and this is years ago. So pretty clean in the last 3-4 years, according to how good this dark web search is. But I think it's good to have this running and alerting you of when things happen, and it'll help you, avoid. So when to change those account details, create new logins, change the password, rotate the password out. It's just good to know. So key takeaways, keeping you safe. And I think this is in my prioritized order. Don't click on links. Don't pass go. Always break the attack chain by navigating directly to the website. Use passkeys and YubiKeys. Remove, and don't forget to remove weak MFA. So that would be your only way to log into your Apple account would be a passkey and a YubiKey, and not another form of MFA like text or email. Even some of these legacy like Duo, some of these apps aren't necessarily as strong as passkeys and YubiKeys. Create another email account that's specifically for financial aspects, and as discussed on page 4. You want to silo the important things in your life, least trust, less noise and spam. Be downright anxious, have anxiety on ACH and wire payments, have a strict process, and independently confirm, even multiple times if necessary, that the payment you think you're making or the wire you're instructing is going to the right place. Get a regular dark web scan going on yourself to get intelligence of what's exposed out there. Use a VPN, at all times, at home and in the office, and adds an extra layer of security. Manage configurations, bug vulnerability management. These are going to require some kind of software, and you may want to have them managed by like an IT provider or an MSP. It's something I do for my clients. Setting up a guest network on a Wi-Fi network. This is pretty easy. Most of these Wi-Fi routers, even if they're from Spectrum or Verizon, Fios, right? Like they have an admin console where you can change the guest network, and you can change your IoT devices like your Ring doorbells and your Amazon Alexa. You can get them all on the guest network. Manage authentication services that utilize privilege access. There was a great comment here about passkeys, but there's some software out there that can help manage users on their behalf. They can step in to make sure when they reset passwords and things like that, that they, there's a chain of command, and there's a procedure to actually change credentials or renew credentials, or change out a lost password. So that can be really helpful from a managed aspect as well. And last was 24/7 detection and response services. Having those fire alarms, understanding when you are being attacked is important as well. So Like I said, these ones with the asterisks are typically provided by an outsourced IT provider. That's something we do at Inquisitive IT as well. But you know, you could use some of these SaaS products on your own and manage yourself. But 1 through 6 are really important, and they take a ton of risk off the table and really disrupt a lot of the attacks we talked about. I have an appendix here which goes into a little more detail on these common playbooks. I know we're running out of time, but just talking about weaknesses and gaps again, password reuse, how using passkeys and YubiKeys can really disrupt some of these attacks. But I'll send this deck out as well to anyone who wants it. I think I have it on my website on Inquisitive IT, but happy to put that out there as well. One other attack before we jump off here is we didn't talk about ransomware. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is typically initiated with a phishing email, like a click on a link. But you know, if your computer is properly configured, you don't have the vulnerability. Typically, it involves both clicking on the link and some kind of bug, and it exploits some kind of bug or executes a vulnerability on your machine and locks down and encrypts basically as much as it possibly can. It has access to. So vulnerability management is important. That's why it's talked about fairly often. Some of the vulnerabilities, believe it or not, can be attacked without a click of the link. I don't think you hear about these that often, but ransomware is, you know, more common in a corporate perspective because they're trying to ransom the data that you're holding. You as an individual are not holding other customer details, privacy details, health insurance, health information. But ransomware is one more I wanted to jump on, but like I said, I'll send the slides out as well if anyone else has an interest. But thank you for coming. Like I said, these awareness seminars, I do them quite often, and happy to do one if you've got clients or individuals you want me to present to. Anything I'm missing here, please let me know. If I love debating kind of how I can make individuals safer. I fell into this, as my father passed away a couple of years ago. I take care of my mother as well. Several of my older relatives, I'm constantly advising them as well. So I think these are things that can help, and make sure you incorporate some of those recommendations I mentioned here. But we're almost out of time. I want to give you a couple of minutes back here. I appreciate you stopping in, and anything I can help with, let me know. Cheers.